Hello? 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 Um, I don't know why. Damn. I thought I had a pretty slick intro this time. That kind of stinks. Uh, but that's on OBS. Hi everybody. As I was saying when I was muted, because I was not looking at the chat. I was focused on getting my capture for Clip Studio Paint open. I was asking how are all of you doing? Because I need to I need to buy some time before I open this. Redo the intro. Okay, okay. By all means. Okay. Just pretend that I wasn't playing this video. At least he did give birth to Freddy Fazbear. Because when you give birth to Freddy Five Bears, and he goes, Michael Afton, Bunny the Bonnie, Chica the Kitchen, Foxy the Fox Pirate Rar, and Yellow Freddy, who's yellow and weird. Rah! uh, Classic of video. And it makes it so simple. It really makes it all so simple when you think about it. But yes, hello again, chat. Hello. Now that we redid the intro, how are all of you doing? Jackie, thank you for resubbing for 7 months. That's pretty great. I appreciate it. Which one is your favorite? Ooh. Honestly, a little bit of a difficult choice. I think it's different depending on the cast. Because, there's different different rosters for the different games. Um, Good. I'm glad you're all doing well. I had said people's names. Thank you for being here. Cardboard, Anya, Lily. I like Opilabud. Squid Game Huggy Wuggy. Hold on, let me get the background music going. There we go. Fucking finally. Apologies for swearing. Um, Zumbo Sauce. Okay, we're not playing that the whole time. No, that was a joke. We are playing this though. Oh, so scary. Oh. Okay. So, for the unaware and the uninitiated, uh, I went down a bit of a little rabbit hole the last month or so. Uh, where oh, where I was learning a lot of info passively and actively about Five Nights at Freddy's. It started passively, where I just learned a lot of things through osmosis, But then I started looking back into it, and I kind of got back into the franchise a little bit. I've never played any of the actual games. I will need to preface, but I got opinions. And what a better way to voice them than here on stream? Because I wanted to make a video about this, uh, but of course, recording situation is of course difficult, as you may know. Let me get the chat back up. Watched all the games a year ago, thought it was fun. We're getting the timeline in this one, hopefully. I'm glad I don't need to explain what these games are to this audience, but I am going to explain my thoughts as though, you know, the people here don't know, what the series is. So, Five Nights at Freddy's, obviously. Horror game franchise made by a man named Scott Cawthon. Very big, arguably one of the most successful horror franchises, ever, actually. And these are the original core games that I at least was aware of. I've always had a weird relationship with this series because I've never played them, and I uh, never directly interacted with the community, like the overall FNAF community. But I have observed it. I've watched it. I've studied it from the sidelines. And I think the thing that finally straw that broke the camel's back that brought me back into action genuinely was so because I had no fucking clue who this guy was. Uh his name is Edwin, and he made the mimic, but none of that sentence made sense to me. So I had to look into it, and I fell into the fucking golden rabbit hole that is Five Nights at Freddy's. Uh and more so, what the community thinks the series is. So I thought we would do a fun compare and contrast of my thoughts of what this franchise was to me before all of this versus what the fandom thinks it is, which we'll get to. We'll get to. I've only ever played the game when that came out and I was roped into watching the movie with friends, so you are my source for all knowledge now. Um, I think I'm gonna do my best at least to give you a satisfying version of these events. So, okay. Here's where I thought this is what I thought these games were. It starts in 1983. A man named William Afton and his partner, his business partner, Henry Emily, make not Five Nights at Freddy's, sorry. They make a location called Freddy Fazbear's, or Fredbear's Family Diner, rather. And unfortunately, William's son, his head gets fucking chomped off by one of the animatronics, and, well, that puts him into a spiral, turning him into a serial killer. This is then followed by Five Nights at Freddy's 2. It takes place a few years later, at a completely different location, where there are animatronics, a new and old version of the cast of animatronics that is seen throughout the franchise. Somehow, the lucky motherfucker that is there survives. I thought initially that in this game you played as the not dead son of William Afton, Michael Afton, under a pseudonym, because you do end up playing as Michael Afton in the original game under a pseudonym. Uh, and in this one, half of the animatronics are possessed. Those are the older ones. And then the newer ones, I thought, were just state of the art, like horrifically state of the art, like anachronistically state of the art animatronics that have like a database in their heads of like serial killers. Uh and I thought, because uh Michael Afton is the reason why that uh his brother, uh okay, I didn't explain that well. My apologies. He stuck his brother in as a joke up to the face of the Fredbear animatronic. And he was like, "Oh, give it a little kiss." Oh. And that and he kissed him. Fredbear kissed a little too hard and took a lot with him. Oh no. And in between, William kills about 5 kids, about 5 different kids. The stuff with the new toys attacking you and two always confused me. You see, I did think that my explanation I came up in my head for that, thank you for the segue, was that William resenting Michael put his face into the database of murderers. So while the possessed animatronics are going after you, because of what he did to his brother, the robot like the cold feeling, like the cold mechanical toy animatronics are coming after you because they're literally programmed to recognize your face and attack and kill on sight. I found out apparently that's not the case, but I always thought that was a fun concept. Uh, then you go to Five Nights at Freddy's 3, or sorry, that's Five Nights at Freddy's 3. This is 1, the original, where all of the animatronics are consolidated back into a new design, the classic sort of design. And here you play as Michael, and you just try to survive Five Nights at Freddy's. Technically 6 or 7, but I digress. Five Nights at Freddy's 3, and the rest of the games, I thought took place in 2017 because, well, for no particular reason, really. I just thought it was, oh, you know what? I remember why. It is because, the game supposedly is supposed to take place 30 years after the original Five Nights at Freddy's, which I mistook as 30 years after the sequel. But no, it's supposed to be after this one. In this one, you go to you're still playing as Mike. You play as Mike for the remainder of the series now. You go to a theme park attraction based on the now urban legends of the many children who were killed at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. And the people who work there, other than yourself, go to one of the older locations and find William Afton's body, like his rotted corpse, stuffed into a suit, and they're like, "Whoa, we should put this on display," because they somehow don't notice all the meat and the tendons and the corpse inside of it. I don't know how. I really don't. But it's just him trying to survive, really. I feel like it doesn't matter if it's a good or bad explanation. We're gonna go insane either way. I hope. I can only hope. And then after your 5th night there, Michael burns down the entire place, uh, leaving his father, who is now named Springtrap, to die. But at some point during that final night, William taunts Michael by going, uh, your sister is still alive, which is not actually in the game. That was a headcanon I have. Or, well, I say had, but I still have, but we'll get into that. Um, your sister is alive, Michael, and she's at the sister location. You get it? You get it? You get it? It's a double meaning. You get it? But no, she's not actually at the quote unquote sister location. She's at the uh Afton Robotics Laboratories because surprise, well, one, surprise to the audience, there's also a sister now who is dead as well. Uh and she was scooped up by an animatronic called Circus Baby, and uh that caused the foreclosure of that chain of spin-off restaurants that William was trying to make. That did not pan out well. Uh and just the weirdest little detail in there is that immediately after he starts renting out the animatronics that were used for Circus Baby's Funtime Pizzeria to birthday parties, like individual birthday parties at like people's homes. And this was obviously to try and murder more kids because he's a psychopath. But also, I need to show you this. I actually forgot to bring this up. Hold on. There is an animatronic that is just... Oh, I guess you can't drag it directly into OBS. Hold on. Maybe I can drag it into Clip Studio. Yes. Oh, wait, no, I don't want to spoil. Hold on a second, chat. I gotta move this around so that way I'm not spoiling you all. Okay, so renting out these hyper detailed, state-of-the-art animatronics to individual birthday parties for money. Weird concept. It's really weird. It's not, you're not getting a suit actor dressed up as like Chuck E. Cheese. This is like if they sent you the fucking Chuck E. Cheese animatronic that's on stage. And one of them looks like this. Just a woman, just a human ballerina. One of the only human animatronics in the entire franchise. And she's one of the ones you can directly rent out for the past 30 odd years. You see, you going, I love Ballora, she's my wife, is proving the point that I'm kind of tiptoeing around. But yeah. And it's also just really, really weird in the sense that, the animatronic that is haunting, that is haunted by, his own daughter is being rented out as well. That's really fucking weird. But let's continue to Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, because at the end of Sister Location, you get scooped. All of your fucking organs, all of your necessary things to be human get scooped out of you. Even your skeleton. And replaced by all the animatronics that collectively were there at the sister location, which escape into the real world. And Mike becomes, and you explicitly see it in the game, you see Mike turn into a literal purple corpse. Ooh. And then he stands back up. And then he stands back up and he's fine. Which brings us to Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. That guy I mentioned at the beginning, Henry Emily, his first appearance is in this game, and it's also why this is the best game, because he gives a very, very, very good performance, his actor. Purple Guy 2.0, yeah, that's basically what Mike is. That's why a lot of people get confused, unfortunately. Uh, so is he a walking skin suit? Yes, he is a walking skin suit, but the thing is, he doesn't have anything supporting him, supposedly. I, in my headcanon, think that, when all of the animatronic stuff left his body, they left him an endoskeleton. And that's what his body is, like, shaped around, but those endoskeletons have, like, some flat-ass square heads. So, what the fuck is keeping up? Ghost goo? The sad thing is, Rocket Lamp, it is. It is literally ghost goo. I will get into it, but yes, you are unfortunately correct. That is the thing. What about FNAF Delivery, the AR mobile game? Here's the thing. I didn't know that existed until a little bit ago. I'm talking about the games that I knew about before I got into this little spiral. Oh shit, they got Slimer in this? Again, Jackie, you are unfortunately hitting the nail on the head real close. There is so much shit in this that we'll go into in just a moment. So, okay, so that guy, Henry Emily, I thought he must have been in jail for what happened in the earlier games, and he was the fall guy for William Afton. However, now he shows back up, and he gives you the most concise, well-executed explanation for literally everything in the timeline that people had dangling thread curiosities about, and it wraps it up real nicely. And he sets this pizzeria on fire that contains all of the haunted animatronics, William Afton included, Michael included even, and they all burn. And then the final game, Ultimate Custom Night, is an epilogue where it is implied heavily that you are playing as William Afton, trapped in hell, being tortured by the animatronics, both the spirits of the animatronics and also the conceptual entities shown throughout the franchise, and even some animatronics that are like hand-me-downs from another business that I guess Fazbear Entertainment acquired at some point. But yeah, Pizzeria Sim looked like a fun-ass game. The end was so metal. Honestly, I have considered playing it. I might even stream it. I gotta be real. But, that little concise summary is really what I had thought FNAF was after I'd fallen off. Like I fell off somewhere around here, and everything I knew about these two games I gleaned from osmosis. And again, I had never played any of these games. Still haven't. Now we get to what the FNAF community broadly thinks the games are, which now includes the new games. Can you see the difference between the two? Between my interpretation and these games? games. I'll give you a hint. There's a lot of contested points in this timeline. So let's go. So, in some lore that is found, I think in the VR games and some of the books, which, by the way, just very quick note, I did not place these to indicate that they were taking place in 2028 or anything. I just didn't, well, I guess I did have space at the end there, but I didn't want to take up the whole line. So, uh, the FNAF community really hates the books. Um, this trilogy right here is explicitly non-canon and was non-canon from day one. The rest of these, as I have come to learn, including the game, there is nothing that really contradicts what happens in the games. Like, there's nothing that would stop these from being canon, and the further we go into this franchise, the more they seem to be canon. And it kind of seems like people are just, on copium, because they don't want to admit how fucking absurd this franchise has gotten, from some of the stuff that's in there. So, let's, wasn't that alluded to be a Silver Eyes thing? What was the dirt mound from Pizza Sim? Well, I don't know what you're talking about, actually. Sorry. So, there's the founding of all the restaurants. This game, my name is Edwin, I made the Mimic. That's the latest game that's coming out this year. I think this summer, if I remember correctly. I actually don't know when it's coming out. And now here's the extremely harsh thing that is unfortunately canon, about Five Nights at Freddy's 4, or Five Nights at Freddy's The Final Chapter, which, to any outside viewer of this series, there's a reason why fans have started calling it just Five Nights at Freddy's 4, and that's because it is sequentially the first thing that ever happens in the timeline. It was meant to be the final game, of course, and it's very clearly a callback to, the final nightmare and the final Friday of the Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th series. Which even then, those weren't the last ones either, so maybe it was a call forward, an intentional, hey, this is not the actual end. But who knows? So, the cutscenes of the game take place in 1983. The gameplay does not. It is actually heavily disputed what happens in the gameplay. Because even though you are in a child's bedroom and you are stopping animatronics from entering your bedroom, there is actual things in the lore that greatly and just explicitly show that this room is a... Sorry, I've never had to say it out loud. It's very ridiculous. It is a bunker that William Afton created to test a scarecrow-esque fear toxin in order to kill children and see how to replicate the act of the animatronics getting possessed. So, I really wonder where Afton gets all his funding. It's just because Freddy's is successful. That's really it. I think he might be from old money, if we want to give like a pre-Freddy's explanation, but I really think it's just because the shit took off in this world. Whatever happened to the bedroom and the house? Why are we doing necromancy sciency shit? That's my exact thoughts. The unfortunate thing that is with the gameplay is that it actually makes too much sense because we see directly in sister location the fact that the house of Five Nights at Freddy's 4, the mini game hallway of Five Nights at Freddy's 4, and the pizzeria location are all separate houses in the same general area, and William Afton built his animatronic company and also secret testing bunkers with direct connections to all three of those locations. And the even though one of the nights is non-canon to the franchise as a whole, which is never said explicitly in the games themselves. And one of them is treated as a direct metaphor for William's child, who the name of William's child in the community, despite the fact that there is material that points to at least one of two different names, they like to call him the crying child instead of like calling him Evan, like the secret name that was revealed in one of the books. I think this is a little pick and choose because they do like to reference the books and theories, but only sometimes and only certain books. And the fact that it is in one of the books, I think, is the reason why they don't want to explicitly confirm the name, so that way they have one more thing to keep chasing, theory-wise. Now, okay, I do agree with you, Anya, in that I don't hate the science fiction aspects of this franchise. However, Scarecrow Fear Toxin Bunker is just a step too far for me. Mostly because it is never seen in, like, actual gameplay. Like, you get to see it on screens, you get to see it in Five Nights at Freddy's 4, but only with the context that you have to learn by looking into the series as a whole, and nothing from the games themselves, really. It's really absurd. They also think that this little funny Dracula sitcom that appears in Sister Location is a metaphor for William Afton's divorce that happens after their kid is murdered, which I believe it was originally intended to mean that. However, I have a different interpretation that will come back later. One thing you must learn about this series is that a lot of stuff that we thought was canon at one point, like how in Five Nights at Freddy's 1, the initial big assumption was that you are playing as the murderer of the 5 missing children, which, by the way, they like to call that event the MCI for short, when I would just call it, you know, the the Five Nights at Freddy's murder or whatever. You know, it just, they like a lot of catchy little nicknames, a lot of little foreshortenings that are very cryptic to outsiders, and honestly kind of hard to learn unless you find a specific YouTuber that, you know, explains what these things are by name. No, here's the thing, Anya. something that is contested on it is that in Five Nights at Freddy's 1, they aren't reported as murdered inherently. They're reported as missing. And because of that precedence, even though we all know these kids were killed and put into the animatronics, that is where my brain, goodness. That is where they decided to do missing kids, missing children incident instead. Exactly, Lily. After making an apology video, I made a mistake. The intro of Sister Location takes place somewhere around here when William Afton was making, his little robotics lab. I'll touch on FNAF World in a bit. So, yeah. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is one of the only games that is explicitly given a date, which is 1987, which is when the infamous bite of 87 that is mentioned in the first game happens. And yes, if you're confused why there is a second bite in 1983, that is because the Five Nights at Freddy's 4 was originally intended to be about the bite of 87. But then Scott realized, oh, the story I'm telling is a little contradictory to everything I had set up before that. So I need to make some adjustments. How about there's a second bite? Which honestly is fine. There is, however, a theory that I will go into about this game. But we'll get there. So, people think that directly after Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is when William Afton dismantles the animatronics, which then leads to him being killed by the ghosts of the children and being shoved into this suit. Or rather, he puts on the suit and it causes him to die because of all the fucking spring-locked mechanisms inside it. Then we have Five Nights at Freddy's 1. And yes, some of you are ahead of me. And this... yeah, the DCI. There's also that too. Here's the thing. Okay, so there's two different incidents. There's the murdered children incident, or missing children incident, which is the one that's talked about in Five Nights at Freddy's 1, and happens sometime around here, unspecified. And then there's the dead children incident, which is what happens in the final night of, or second to final night of Five Nights at Freddy's 2. And a lot of people love to pretend that never happens. That all 5 of those kids that you see explicitly in the cutscenes of William Afton dismantling the animatronics at the 2 location in the 3rd game, I'm sorry how confusing that is, it never happens. But it did. So, this one should be the least complicated. However, no one can fucking agree on when this takes place. And the reason I have written 2 different things here is because I would say broadly the community thinks that this is the 1990s. However, they can't agree on a date. But then there's one date that they all love to go around, and that's Matt Pat's one. And Game Theory, run by Mr. Matthew Patrick, is a YouTuber who is currently retired, but his claim to fame was theorizing over these games. And part of that theorizing, or rather, all of that theorizing, greatly overcomplicated people's relationship to these games and resulted in the many people who are still chasing the dragon of the final little bits of lore, and even ignoring lore explicitly set by the new games, or pretending all the new games are in a different canon, or or just making shit up. And a lot of theory channels, and very specifically the wiki, love to cite each other or never cite anything at all. If you look on the wiki, the Five Nights at Freddy's original game says that it takes place in 1993. However, Five Nights at Freddy's 3 is said to take place 30 years exactly after Five Nights at Freddy's 1. And on the wiki, the date for Five Nights at Freddy's 3 is 2027. So even when the wiki wants to say, oh, this is actually 1993, they really are just trying to stop themselves from just copying MatPat. Which, by the way, his original date assumption of 1997 is, well, it's not a funny answer, but his first Five Nights at Freddy's theory he ever made was making the assumption that the game was sincerely based off of an actual murder that happened at a real-life Chuck E. Cheese in 1997. It is, frankly, I don't think it should be on YouTube. I think that borders on libel. Yes, we're talking about Five Nights at Freddy's chick. Yeah, that's where the date of 1997 came from. And something I have learned from going through a bunch of FNAF YouTubers, a lot of them still use that date, even when knowing the context of it. But even more than that, I just don't like game theory Mr. Matthew Patrick, because he has a lot of eugenics talk in a lot of his other theories, and some weird sort of right-wing leaning beliefs that he's said offhandedly on streams. And I don't really know how he feels about trans people. I vaguely heard that he is a little about it. So I don't want to say, you know, I don't want to go too much into it. But I am hesitant to really give any of his theories any credence, especially when 90% of them are wrong. They're just wrong. Oh, he's not? He supports LGBTQ people? Okay, good. Okay, that's good at least. But yeah. So, sister location, I need to remind you, I need to really, really remind you that sister location, at the very end of the game, you get your organs and your skeleton removed from your body, and then your skin, literally just your skin, with no brain, no skeleton, no organs, rises back up, and you are haunting it using, and here's where the fucking ghost goo comes in, guys. Michael Afton is haunting his own skin using this thing called Remnant, because the FNAF community at large, seeing the sci-fi elements of sister location and the fact that William was trying to replicate the incident, that caused his own child to possess one of his animatronics. Uh, that he was murdering all of the kids for scientific inquiry and nothing else. Do you understand how psychotic that sounds? It is the weirdest interpretation of this. And a lot of people support it. Like, a lot. Like, I can understand replicating it scientific method style because you're like noticing what's going on, but he's doing it because he's a child murderer. He's doing it because he is a literal sociopathic narcissistic murderer. There is like, he's not doing it because he's like, oh, I need to test these theories at any lengths possible, no matter the sacrifice. I'll I'll kill 1,000 children before I let this company die. No. He's doing it because he has the means. He has the means, and he's fucking psychopathic. This sounds like some shit that'd be written for one-off characters in Vampire Hunter D. Probably. He's like a wild animal. He's just running off impulses. Oh, man. A lot of people support it because it's basically true. To an extent, yes. But also, to interpret it that way, I think robs a lot of the narrative heft of, you know, a man watches his child get murdered. He grows an extreme resentment to the child, to his older brother that killed him, and then he starts becoming a nihilistic, resentful killing machine who is just doing this just so that way he can suppress the urge to kill his own kid. He goes from vengeance to a person of habit to the murderer. Again, I just personally, I feel like a lot of that weight that the narrative could have is robbed a little bit by just keeping the clinical, almost SCP-like experimentation. Like, come on. You're not doing fucking you're not doing SCP. You are correct. Thank you. And to be clear, I'm not trying to say anybody is wrong or anything aside from, you know, me going, what the fuck are people interpreting this as? That's for comedy. Anybody in the chat and anybody who watches this in a VOD, I am not trying to disprove, I suppose. Well, I'll do a little bit of disproving. But, like, you know, if we have different interpretations, I mean, you know, that's nothing against you. I'm not holding anything against you. I'm just trying to amp it up for comedic effect. Because when you lay it all out, let's face it, we can all have a hearty little chuckle. FNAF lore was built over time. Things have lost meaning over these years. Yes, you bring up a great point that we will actually tackle very soon. But let me continue. The momentum here. So, because of people thinking it's 1997, this game is classified as being in 2027. And that's really the only big difference. These games are speculated to be somewhere between 2028 and 2029. Um, I need to really break down a very funny piece of lore because we're starting to get into the post Scott Cawthon doing it by himself era. So in Security Breach, we find out that the location of this pizzeria from FNAF 6, after it burns down, it falls in a sinkhole. William Afton, it is contradicted both in the games, the books, and surrounding media whether or not he actually survived, left the premises, or was wheeled away in the hospital. It's a little loose because of some things that happen at the end of Security Breach, one of its endings. But they, after that building falls in a sinkhole and is set on fire, they just build a mini mall on top of it. And not only does this location fall in a sinkhole, the Afton house that you see in Sister Location, the one that Michael lives in, that one falls in a sinkhole as well. And they, for some reason, incorporate his house as part of the new building. It's like at the bottom floor behind like a false wall. But they leave the fucking Freddy Fazbear's Pizza in the hole, just in a fucking sinkhole. How structurally unsound is that particular area? I don't know. I think it's really funny because I didn't know where these games took place at first. Honestly, I kind of forget right now. I think it was Ohio, I want to say. I know the town that these games take place in is called Hurricane. I know that much. Oh, man. Scott's last attempt at game making, he didn't really have an idea of what he wanted to do with the lore. Oh, no, yeah, 1000%. All of this was just built on top of each other, and a lot of the things that, honestly, the entire plots of, like, FNAF 3, 4, 5, and 6 are just to try and explain things that the community did not understand. Like, he made FNAF 3 to explain, oh, this was the murderer, since all of you are so confused by it. I thought I had explained that. I did not, apparently. FNAF 4 was to explain, you know, the tangential relationship of a lot of these characters together and what William was up to, but he did not explain that well either. And then Sister Location was trying to tie everything together in a big bow, but people didn't like it. Which sucks, because I think this one's pretty good. Story-wise, at least. And because, you know, I haven't played the game, so. And this one, I think, actually ties everything up in a nice little bow. And yet it is still contested. Very contested. Sister Location didn't feel like a conclusion real. Well, I should preface that with Sister Location, that was made in mind with making a finale. Like, it literally ends on a cliffhanger where it's like, you know, I will come find you, father. Clearly setting up, like, a fifth game. Oh, sorry, a sixth game. Pizzeria Simulator is a yeah, I said that. Kansas, thank you. I do believe Kansas is correct. It's not letting you say Utah. But Utah shouldn't... I hope Utah is not a banned term. I'm not seeing any things in chat about that. Little pop-ups from the auto mod. I personally don't think Pizza Sim's main character is Michael. You know, there is um a decent amount of evidence to support that. And I will not stop you from thinking that. Uh, but the funny thing, continuing off of our previous point here, typed Utah too fast. Oh, okay. Uh, is Help Wanted. Help Wanted is explicitly in universe um a metatextual video game. You see, the Five Nights at Freddy's games exist in universe, but they were created as a cover up for all the murders that supposedly happened as a rogue fan developer making these games, and then they acquired them. Uh and not only did they acquire them, they adapted them into a VR game to be like, haha, wouldn't it be so funny if all of this shit was real? Uh which is really, really, really weird. Like FNAF 3 was already kind of weird in like making a theme park out of like in-universe real murder, but making a video game off of rumors that your company is liable for like tons of deaths, like at upwards of 30 murders. Really weird. The closest comparison I could think of is if in the 80s Nintendo bought the rights to a Mario porn. Like this is real. They bought the rights to an adult film that was starring a man dressed as Mario. And they did it they bought this that way it would never be in circulation ever again. But they do legally own it. This is the equivalent. Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted is like the equivalent of them making a porn game based off of the real porn that they bought to make sure no one ever sees again. Oh. It takes so much balls to make a weird writing decision. I respect it. I do actually like it. I must preface, I like this. I like meta-contextual narratives, and I do think of all the weird ass things that I'm discussing in the Five Nights at Freddy's timeline. This is not one of them. This company is fucking weird, even outside of William Afton himself, but I'm gonna get into that. Sorry that I keep doing that, but you know, we are getting to these things at least, you know. But I gotta pace it. I gotta pace it well. So, there is a subplot in here, or rather, it is a main core tenet of the plot of this game. I'll get back into in a moment, because it is difficult to really parse and talk in relation to everything. So yes, the AR video game. This game existed for about 4 or 5 years on your phone. The in-universe explanation is that, much in the same way of the Circus Baby Pizza stuff, after the company went down, well, I mean, rather, this one location went down, the company decided not only to do the cover-up stuff, they decided you can rent the animatronics based on the horror video game version of them. So not only are you're not ordering, like, Chica from, you know, Five Nights at Freddy's 1. No, you are, my apologies, you are not ordering Chica from Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. You're ordering Chica from Five Nights at Freddy's 1. Like the horror version that wants to kill you. And wouldn't you know it, things went bad. And they also not only were mass producing these animatronics, They also were mass producing stuff like ones based off of Springtrap. You know, the murderer, who was the CEO of the company. Isn't it weird that you know, you would make your your dead CEO a murderer in your own video game in universe? Oh, it's just funny. It's just funny to think about. And then you mass produce him, and people can buy him, and then he comes to your house and he murders you. That's so fucking stupid. Oh, Shek, we'll get into that. We'll get into that. I have a big theory about that. Um, Also, there's a second VR video game. Um, the framing device goes directly into Ruin, which is I'm getting ahead of myself rather. Um, so in Security Breach, you play as some kid. I forget his name. Chat, please help me. I have streamer brain. Gregory. Yes. I remembered it before chat, but thank you, Blue, thank you, Anya. Frisk. Oh man, imagine if you were playing as Frisk. But yeah, so you play as just some kid named Gregory. He is implied to be homeless, but in dialogue he does talk a lot about his parents. So either he's run away from home, his parents have died, or all of the above. It's hard to tell. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, despite everything, despite this specific incident where a bunch of mass-produced robots murdered their clientele, somehow the company survived from that. They built their giant Pizzaplex mall on top of, you know, that specific location. And they cracked artificial intelligence. They have robots that are, even though a little wonky for some of these, mostly Chica and Monty, the alligator, he's new. As you can see with Freddy, he is not only sapient, he's very cognizant of everything going on. Yeah, Monty doesn't have a mind. Chica, it like repeats lines. Roxy has a personality when she isn't chasing you around. And then Freddy is just aware. He is alive. It is really odd, the spread of intelligence between these four. My name is Edwin. Welcome, Sonny. Oh, that's the wrong video. Chica gave Chica a super voice for some reason. If you're saying the voice actress did a good job, I would agree. I like these characters. Monty's a little scary, I will admit. But that's because of all the animatronics in this franchise up to this point, he is just an animal with a human body. Like, he fucking rips and tears like he's goddamn Doom Guy. It's a little terrifying. Chica also eats a lot for some reason. You know. Hungry. Oh, so hungry. But in one single night, Gregory causes, all three other animatronics to be completely destroyed in a state of near disrepair. Destroys and causes a lot of direct property damage to the Pizzaplex Mall, uh, is the direct ultimate killer of William Afton, the overall series antagonist who survived one fire, not two fires, but a third fire started by Gregory. And we find out that despite this game, where he is in hell being tortured by all the animatronics, what happens in real life is that stops at some point because all of the non-William Afton animatronics fuse together into a giant heaping mass of scrap metal called the Blob. Well, I guess they're the ultimate killer, but Gregory sets all of that in motion in a single night. Also, there's this lady, Vanessa, who I think should be the actual protagonist of this franchise, because, well, I like women. Smiles. That's a superpower she got. Chica got the voice that activates voice switches. Monty has the power limbs. Roxy has X-ray. Roxy has X-ray. What the fuck? I didn't know that. I really didn't know that. What? Why? Why does she have that? Also, yeah, I guess that means they not only cracked AI intelligence, they cracked X-ray vision? Question mark? 84% sure Vanessa was supposed to be playable protagonist and woman. Yeah, like, from what I heard about the internal design documents, you were supposed to be alternating between Gregory and Vanessa, but I think she should just be the permanent protagonist, personally. And that's because they do a lot of build up for her in Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted, cause in that game, you are not playing as yourself, you are playing as Vanessa, who is a big fan of the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. To the point where she became a tester for the VR game, and you are playing the latest beta build. But for some, okay, and here's where the complicated part comes in. So, for some fucking reason, there's some higher up at the some higher up at the Fazbear Entertainment Company looked at these games and were like, "Hey, can you take the circuit boards from the Mimic?" Which this clown thing is not the Mimic, by the way. Just to make that more confusing for you. But can you take the circuit boards from this fucking, at this point in the timeline, from what people think it is, a 50-year-old animatronic, and somehow put its code from 50 years ago into our video game for some reason? I think it was to make all the animatronics, like, behave in the ways that they would have in real life, because the code for the other animatronics was built off of the Mimics. But again, they kind of aren't that complex when not haunted, at least not up until literally Security Breach. So it's really weird. And the Mimic takes an unused, fully modeled render of William Afton in his actual murder outfit, which was a mascot costume used before they made Springtrap. the Spring Bonnie suit, and they put the mimic. Well, sorry, I'm looping back around there. The mimic possesses it somehow without being programmed to, and then is found to be messing with the code of the game independently, and then is split apart into like different pieces by a coder who also hides secret messages in the game that is trying to talk about all the bad shit that that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is covering up in this game. and Vanessa, thinking this is an intentional Easter egg and not, hey, I'm trying to hide this and bury it in the code, puts the pieces back together and accidentally brainwashes herself into taking on the personality of the mimic, which has taken on the personality of William Afton, causing and this is the best comparison I could make, a Batman Beyond Return of the Joker style split personality, which, you know, is an improper term, of course, but in fictional context, that is literally what this is. Which, in the same way that Tim Drake shifts into the Joker because of a fucking nanochip implanted on the back of his neck, Vanessa, from playing the game too much, shifts into a personality mimicking the mimic that they nickname Vanny, because she too dresses up like a bunny rabbit and wants to murder people. However, she doesn't actually end up murdering anybody, to my knowledge. And that plotline gets dropped because Gregory brainwashes her, or kills her, or doesn't, and then Gregory is her first victim, depending on the ending you get. But the commonly accepted timeline outcome is that she is saved, and Gregory is still alive because he shows up in the next couple games. Vanny, it is similar to Vanessa, but also Bunny. Yeah. I will give him props. I think that line's fucking hilarious, and I think they knew what they were doing putting that in. I think sincerely that was a self-referential jab, and I respect that. She didn't even get paid for being on the evil side. I know, fucked up, isn't it, right? Also, welcome, Eggman. Apologies, I'm just trying to catch up with the chat real quick. I got too into explaining that my brain kind of tuned the chat out for a second. How is it that she was on the roof and dead on the street in that one security breach ending? So, okay, Blue, thank you so much for bringing that up. So, in one ending, the entire building is burning down, and Vanessa, dressed up as Vanny, falls off the roof and dies, and then is unmasked and shown as being, you know, Vanessa. However, while the pizzeria is burning, we see it's Yalt VT. Thank you for following. In the distance, you see the building burn down, and Vanessa, somehow alive, is standing up there. And this has caused a genuine rift in the FNAF community as to whether Vanessa actually has a identical twin sister that is her, instead of what I think was the genuine intent, which was that was her ghost. That was her ghost sadly looking out onto the building as it burns, and she realizes, oh, I am doomed here to walk these fucking uh shattered halls forever. Or clones. Yeah, yep. Eggman, you also bring up a good point. So, something that the FNAF community wants to ignore heavily because it's in the books is I brought this up last stream, by the way. Um, there's this thing called um Fazgoo, which is a children's science kit where if you give you make this little glob of pink goo at home, you fucking put in a bit of your DNA, like a tooth or a hair, and you wait a few weeks, it will grow into an identical copy of yourself that wants to murder you and replace you, and then become a consumer of all things Five Nights at Freddy's related. And people are so convinced that Gregory, the protagonist of this game, is secretly a clone of William Afton's kid. Specifically, Evan, or the crying child, which, how would they get his DNA? And if it was William who made it, Gregory is like 10? Did he make it while he was springtrapped? Did he make it while he was locked up in the back of that pizzeria? It's just really funny to think about. There's also, yes, Anya. There's also the theory that he himself is a robot because whenever he sees Vanny, the screen glitches out in a weird animatronic way, which I don't think that was intended. I really don't. I think they were just being all like, "Ooh, it's scary, woo." But people think he is an animatronic, and aside from that one thing, and the fact that, like, oh, he mentions his parents, but he's homeless, even though he could have, he could have run away, or his parents could have died, like I had said earlier. There's very little evidence implying that he is a robot. There is also the theory that the entire events of Security Breach is scripted, and this was an intentional way to test the safety of the FNAF building, which then causes it to be foreclosed and shuttered and collapse in on itself. I really don't get that interpretation. I really don't. I really don't. Because then why would they let the Freddy and Gregory, especially Vanessa, go off scot-free? That was not a pun. But why would they not bring them back in when that would make both of them proprietary assets of Freddy Fazbear Entertainment? The Pizzaplex didn't stand a chance against the gimmick. My name is Edwin. I made the gimmick. Honestly, if they had cloning goo in the main games, that would solve the missing children's incident quickly. Yeah, because there is also the theory that the crying child himself is a clone of people, of kids that he has murdered in the past, or a clone of William Afton himself as a child, or Michael is a clone of William Afton as a child, or that their daughter, oh my god, I forgot her name, I'm sorry, the one that possesses baby, is a clone of Afton's wife, or the kids that fucking William Afton murders are also clones of some of the other characters because they share names, like the fucking two people that run the night shift in Five Nights at Freddy's 2 just so happen to share names with two of the kids that are murdered. And whoa, what kind of insane fucking leaps do you gotta go? People can just have the same name. Yes, it's confusing for continuity, but like fucking imagine making clones of two of your workers and then publicly murdering. I don't get it. I don't get it. But these are real things. These are real things that I have found in the lead up to this stream. Elizabeth, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Do you have any thoughts on Maskbot? I don't know who Maskbot is, but we'll get to the bottom of that later. When the fuck did this turn into newer Jurassic Park movies? I know, right? It's crazy. It's wild. And okay, so Help Wanted 2, that game takes place immediately after all this. And you play as the father of the protagonist of FNAF Ruin. And in this, the father, he is not possessed by the mimic AI. In fact, the game implies that he dies giving the mimic's code back to what is metaphorically the devil, which that's a whole can of worms that I actually don't think I could properly explain to you here. But in that process, he also ends up injecting his soul, or rather the game injects his soul, or the company murders him and puts his soul into a animatronic in the completely destroyed Pizzaplex Mall, just so that way a specific robot can give a mask to his daughter. And his daughter does not know about any of this. And she goes to the Pizzaplex not to find her father, but to find Gregory, who is her best friend. And of all the, like, protagonists, the playable protagonists in this series, aside from maybe Michael, she has the most reasonable reason to be doing any of this. She's just worried about her friend. But did you have to throw in the detail about this one specific broken animatronic secretly being possessed by her dad, which has, from my knowledge, no actual stated... It's never stated in the game. Imagine making clones of your children because you have a god complex, right? A way to show employees that they're disposable. Well, actually, they kind of pull a Willy Wonka in that, aside from Vanessa herself, because they want at least one human security guard, the entire Pizzaplex is automated by robots. And what baffles me about Help Wanted 2 is that all the minigames on this are, well, they're, one, based on the events of Sister Location, but two, they seem to depict events at the former Pizzaplex that have the implications that this company has murdered all of its employees that used to work there. Like, they didn't fire them. They very explicitly murdered them, covered it up, and then also put it in a commercial video game that pretty one for one explains how they did it. And that's not like secret lore or anything. That's just the text of the game. It's it's kind of like, huh? No. The job market sucks so bad. It's so true. By the way, I don't know if I pointed it out. We're in the 2030s now. We're in the future. Oh, I didn't even mention that in Security Breach they have holograms. It's just for decoration. But again, it really shows you that this company is like on the forefront of a lot of scientific discoveries and stuff that would benefit mankind, benefit or destroy mankind, depending on whose hands it are in. And well, they seem to be using it for the destroy mankind, just on a very small level. And then Ruin happens. So Ruin has maybe the most baffling gimmick of any of these games. And that feels like saying a lot at this point. Also, that's a good joke about Mickey 17 Jackie. I still gotta watch that. Like, I've had that on my bookmarks for like weeks now. I still need to watch that. I've heard it's so good. Uh, Let me catch up with chat because chat was not scrolling. My apologies. FNAF Tech is just 1,000 years in the future. Well, actually, a lot of this stuff, we're kind of close. We're kind of close to it. It's just, should not be where it was. Also, hi Willow. Thank you for coming to the stream. Thank you for the kind words. Oh my god, I didn't even think about the friend lock videos. Yeah. When I was doing those jokes, that was just like a recurring joke on the channel, Pokemon H, the friend lock videos, and then fucking uh the Scarlet friend lock. Uh Oh, I didn't even think about the fact that like I'm now actually dissecting the lore for all of you. That was not intentional. um and the time you got, well, I, a little secret here. I wasn't actually scared. You see, I was acting. I was pulling a funny for the video, for the content. But yeah, also, I need to quickly mention before we go into Ruin that there is a lot of dispute over when these games take place, and a lot of people think it takes place in the 2040s. At latest, I have seen people think that Ruin takes place somewhere in the 2050s, even, and I genuinely think these are baseless. Because I cannot find anything to support that, but even more so, the people who are talking about it, they kind of glance over it in the same breath that they explain other reasonings behind their thoughts on the lore. How would Cassie be a child and know Gregory in the 2050s? Exactly! Exactly. You get it. But let's continue. The wild claim that 2087 for the original game? Oh god. But yeah. So in Ruin, it has a really weird gimmick that is very very Nintendo inspired in the sense of like Metroid Prime 2 or Zelda Link to the Past or Zelda Link Between Worlds or Majora's Mask. Actually, probably explicitly Majora's Mask, in that um you put on a mask and it alters the world. It does not alter you, but it alters the world around you. It shows you an AR environment overlaid on top of the ruined pizzeria. Presumably, this was a product that was sold while the company was still functioning. However, or rather, the building was still functioning. However, what complicates that is is the fact that the AR equipment allows you to walk through solid objects and walls. And this is not explained in the game. I don't even know if it's acknowledged in the game, even once. Uh, at least from the gameplay that I have personally watched, it does not seem that way. And also on non-solid. Yes, you're right, Shek. Because there's a bit where you have to walk across a gap, and you are walking on nothing. You are flying, essentially. I personally feel like digital technology has some level of high. I don't know how to explain it though. Like, aside from like like let's forget all of the theory crafting stuff from the surrounding fandom for a second. How in universe? How does this work? How are you able to do this, especially in a building that is ruined, literally ruined? Um, the overlay shouldn't work in staff areas, let alone completely fucking destroyed areas that are nowhere even near the place that they once were. Because much like the original building, for all the way back from over here, the mini mall has too fallen a little bit into the earth, just a little. Like, you can still access the front bit, but then the further down you go, oh no, they never touched the metaphysics of the world. Maybe it's some kind of Lane Tron kind of shit. Fucking okay, that's a loaded fucking remark there, since Tron and Lane are like two of my favorite pieces of media there. One, Tron stuff does not work in the real world, barring Tron Ares, which, oh god. Oh, oh no. Oh god. Oh no. Oh man. Sorry. Uh but two, Lane is just God. Like, she is just an incarnation of God. Either that, or she never existed, or she's always existed, or any of the metacontextual interpretations that you could come up with. But what I'm trying to say here is that there are very clear, distinctive implications in both series lore for how they work. Uh, or at the very least, interpretations that you can glean. I've never watched either, though. Lane was an. You thought Lane was a neat fan fail girl? No, 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 no. Like, no. You might be thinking of like Watamote or something. Uh, it's almost like they stopped trying to make it seem like they had any idea a long time ago. Yeah, but both series' digital realities affect real life. Well, again, those had explanations for it. Like, Tron is Tron is in a way metaphorical. Like, the actual events of both movies, my one of my favorite little bits of lore, is that they take place over the span of a few seconds in the real world. Like, because computer processing works extremely fast. And so when uh uh they get lasered in, they're basically almost immediately getting lasered back out. Uh, but in Lane, again, the digital world is only affecting the real world because she is God. Like, she is definably master of reality for everyone. She is God. I'm sorry to argue back and forth. It's just, uh, love those pieces of media. It could be something like that in FNAF somehow. I agree. I agree it could be. I just want an actual textual explanation, and I would have preferred it be in this game because I think something something that I broadly have not even covered yet. Oh, I almost revealed a big secret. Um, I think broadly is that these games would make a lot more sense if certain pieces of information were tacked on at different points. Like if we had remakes, which I know there was intended to be remakes of the games at one point, but if we had a little more concise planning, uh, which obviously, I'm not talking about like, you know, the original making of, because I totally get just building off of what had been before from Scott Cawthon's perspective. I'm talking about retroactively. I'm talking explicitly about uh making these make a little more sense and getting the info that could have and probably narratively should have been in a prior game actually be over in there. Yes, we'll actually talk about FNAF World in a second. Um so but anyways, Ruin in that plot, she is lured down into the depths of the pizzeria where she thinks Gregory is, I think, being held captive or being, or at the very least is stuck. And that's why he's been gone for what would have been at that point almost a year. Um, but no, 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 no. Uh, you see, the mask had been hacked by the events of Help Wanted 2, and secretly, she's actually being lured down by the mimic. Oh! And she ends up freeing it, which allows it to well, depending on the ending you get, either it fucking is implied to really mercilessly kill her. Like there's an ending based off of the movie Brazil, which I think is kind of dope. To be honest with you, like I am not the biggest fan of Brazil, the movie. Uh, don't take that out of context. Uh, um, I'm not the biggest fan of that movie, but using that as the basis for uh an ending based off of it, I think it's kind of cool. I think that's pretty neat. Either that or you kill the mimic and the series just ends here, like all loose threads done. Or you escape the mimic, you meet Gregory on the outside, and for some reason that is currently unexplained in the game, which maybe will be explained in the near future, Gregory pushes you back down, uh, which, when I say that, I mean literally he pushes you down like an empty elevator shaft, and you are implied to survive that. So you're, real strong kid. Drinks her milk. Uh, so yeah. The FNAF remakes was just one game, and it would have been non-canon since it's part of the fanver. Uh, yes, but also no. Uh, something I think is when I was reading about the game, it seemed as though the initial intent was to have it be non-canon, and then it was upgraded to the status of this is intended to be an actual canonical remake of the games, and then complications with that caused it to be canceled. That's just my loose understanding, though. I could be wrong, but uh, you know, I'm explaining things. Um, so let's go back to this game, this one that stretched really far across the timeline that you might have been confused about in the background. We may be talking about different things then. Ah, I see. Uh, ooh, just plain Dan. don't don't get me started on Tron Ares. I gotta stay focused. I gotta stay focused. Ooh, ooh. I will honestly. I should do a Tron expose like this. Ramble about that next time. Uh, in preparation for this, did you subject yourself to any of the books? I have loose knowledge of some of the books. I have not read them in the same way that I have not played any of these games. But uh, from what I understand, aside from just a few things that are contradictory, there is nothing. There is nothing in them that contradicts any of the lore of the games. And it kind of seems like people pick and choose when they want to acknowledge that fact when crafting theories online. And I think that's silly. Because, I mean, we're already doing, like, metaphysical reality warping technology over here. I think we can allow for, like, clones and animatronics that, like, are almost bootlegs. And I think at one point, William Afton becomes, like, a giant like fucking kaiju made out of scrap metal, I think. Don't quote me on that one, but I think that was one of the plot lines. Uh Sorry, chat keeps not scrolling for some reason. Yes, FNAF World is metatextual. So FNAF World is a game that is a metaphor for the afterlife of this universe. Uh, and because of that, and very specifically because it starts where Five Nights at Freddy's 4 ends, uh, it is the most contested video game in the whole franchise because people want to interpret it literally, contextually, and metaphorically, and usually the people theorizing on it are not willing to accept all three of those things coexisting and usually honing in on one aspect of that. I'll be honest, FNAF World was one of the ones I looked at. I was like, I kind of want to play this one, because it looks like a really simple RPG. Um, but as in simple gameplay wise, not a lot of overcomplicated, like, oh, I gotta manage all of these systems, just fucking get the most powerful characters, upgrade, kill. I enjoy that. uh it's very flashing lights though. I did see that, but you know what, maybe I'm getting a little more keen on the possibility of playing one of these games. I don't think I'll actually play any of the really jump scary ones on stream because well, I actually don't like jump scare games. They kind of scare me. They kind of I have genuinely, chat, for the last couple of Halloweens, I have considered playing Slender the Eight Pages from fucking 2011. I have pussied out every time. That game still fucking scares me as a almost 26-year-old. And I think FNAF is a little worse because it does actually build up the tension. At the very least with the first game, you know, it has that atmosphere. It has that sort of, you are trying to prevent yourself from ever getting jump scared, and the tension of that genuinely nerve-wracking to an extent. Oh boy. Uh but yeah. So with FNAF World, it's a cutesy looking game that is secretly a metaphor for the afterlife in these games, where all the little souls go. Uh, the complicated aspect that people don't like acknowledging is that characters who are explicitly non-canon to the lore appear in this video game, and interact with the main stuff. And the secret buried narrative, which directly relates to the secret stuff in FNAF 3, which I have not talked about either yet. So, FNAF 3, extremely simple game on the surface. There is only one animatronic. There's a lot of bullshit systems that are causing you to hallucinate, because somehow they've built a building that has so little air circulation that you can suffocate and die in it somehow. I don't get how. It's a pretty small building too. I don't know. But if you do a lot of esoteric cryptic shit that you probably, if you knew nothing about these games going in, you probably would never ever figure out on your own, to be honest. You end up playing a bunch of secret mini games, which leads to a non-canon ending where, well, let's call it pseudo-canon ending, because that's contested a lot as well. That, all the little souls, at the very least, the first five and, the puppet and, the crying child are put to rest. And in FNAF World is a meta-contextual explanation of how all of that was going down and how all of that was set up in the afterlife for that to occur. And then the thing that causes it to be contested is the fact that, you know, they're still haunting some of the animatronics by this point in the timeline. The working theory is that you do put the soul to rest for, you know, the crying child, but everyone else, doing it the way you do in these games causes them not to ascend with him to heaven. Like they accidentally fuck themselves and they're stuck here on Earth because of that. But yeah, I'm on the level of survival horror rather than purely horror. That's fair. I like horror as in like dread. I love horror that instills a feeling of continual dread, like Skinamarink. But yeah, to each their own. But for funsies, for video games, I love like Resident Evil 4 remake. I still need to play the original, but I love remake. It was a lot of fun. Um, does FNAF even have government regulate? You see, that's the kind of lore I want to know, because this world is so fucking wild with its implications, you know? That's always the fun part of thinking about these fictional universes that have like really in-depth lore and mechanics and weird shit, but they're not going into it on the broader scale, you know? Because surely, if these guys figured out how to do like artificial intelligence holograms, ghost possessing animatronics, confirmation of like the afterlife, all that sort of stuff, surely someone else in that world has to have picked up on some of that, or at the very least, they see what Freddy Fazbear Pizza is doing, like in the news every now and again. They're like, "What the fuck? Huh? We can do that? Huh? What?" But yeah. Um. Let's see here. You probably couldn't figure it out if you knew most of it. I take that as an insult. But no, I mean it's yeah. From what I've seen, no FNAF lore person really gets FNAF World. And I think honestly, I think it's really simple. It's just well, I mean, it's basically the explanation that I just said, but it's also just a meta commentary on like how Scott Cawthon felt so pressured to like make these games and uh kind of just misses making games for fun, making games for his kids. There's even like a really buried secret where it's so funny because the interpretation of it it literally seems like it's just a cameo of going like, "Oh hey, this is me sitting with my kids enjoying some time together." But the theorist community has reinterpreted it as two different things. One is uh one the first theory is okay. The first theory is okay. It is interpreting that it is the crying child's happiest memory, which is him sitting with his father and his brother, Michael and William, watching TV together. Which I'm willing to accept that. I'm willing to accept that interpretation. The funnier of the two theories is people who see the figure, the silhouette created by them watching the TV, and have interpreted it as a pixelated angel. And the like unlike every other character, even characters that were, cameo characters, including the secret character that you have to get to find this even more buried secret ending, um, has never come back up. This angel has never came back. So I'm pretty sure they're all just interpreting the silhouette wrong. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what I'm saying about like I don't think people are getting the interpretation of these games correct. That chat message was in reference to FNAF 3 wall panel thing. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's always hard to tell when chat is not keeping up as well as I would intend. You'd think it would just work, but Twitch has been kind of buggy lately. I love RE4 more than most of my friends and family. I think the original is absolutely worth checking out. I do have it. Actually, I have all the Resident Evil games. I just have not played all of them because they are a little long. A little long. Not a bad thing, of course. Just, I'm a busy lady. Theory crafting has melted our brains so bad. Well, it has certainly melted the FNAF community broadly. And I think I've made all the points that I wanted to make here, but this is not the end of the stream, chat, because unless if you were really really attentive before and you saw the little that occasionally when I was scrolling back and forth, I have my own theory. I have my own new timeline that I have come up with, and I'm going to take you into it step by step. So, something that I failed to talk about, is that in the VR games, they have these little coins that say the date founded in 1983. And I excluded that from up here because a lot of the theory crafting channels really, really, really hate this. Because it contradicts stuff within their own theories instead of just reinterpreting their theories to work around the state. Um, which I think is a little silly. Tracey, no, they'll get you. Well, I think they're gonna get me either way from how I have, talked about all of their theories up to this point. Uh, Genuinely, no shade. I am just trying to be comedic and entertaining. I'm specifically not referencing any specific people except Matt Pat because I'm not personally a fan. But like, you know, he's retired. He's done his due. I'm like small potatoes down here with 9 people watching. So, uh, but regardless, uh, I believe the FNAF 4 and the FNAF 2 locations were opened in the late 70s, and then Freddy Fazbear Pizza was opened in 83. I do think that the cutscenes were happening uh from FNAF 4 in the year 1983. Uh and now here's the really divergent bit. I think the main 5 kids were murdered before Charlie, who is the spirit that haunts the puppet. I have failed to inform you all that the puppet is possessed by the daughter of Henry, the guy that William Afton founded the company with. Uh, I have played every mainline RE game. I'm interested to see how you feel about the others. I mean, I'll probably blue sky about it. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. But I think the 5 kids were murdered before Charlie. There's a significant amount of evidence, and I found out about this through a FNAF YouTube video I saw this morning, actually. So, in the latest game, that is not out yet, not the Mimic one, by the way, it is another spin-off game, I forget what it's called. I think it is literally just FNAF Kart, but, which honestly, I think it's kind of a funny concept for a game that I really appreciate. It's a fucking kart racing Mario Kart style video game with jump scares. Like the little object boxes that you throw at other players have jump scares in them that distract you and like damage your cart or like swerve you off the road. 5 laps at Freddy's. Thank you. That's a pretty good name. But I think that's a charming concept. But like in the pre-release showings of stuff for it, uh there is a car based off of William Afton's car in the mini game that depicts Charlie's death. And he has a pair of fuzzy dice on his dash stand or his window rather. And uh well, there's 2 numbers on there that aren't normally found on 6-sided dice very prominently in display. Do you see where I'm going with that? um but seeing that and then watching the rest of the video, which was really good. I wish I could actually cite the source on this. It was, oh god. Hold on. I'm actually going to find the video so that way I can credit give credit where credit is due. Uh since this is not like me being funny haha about like uh other people's theories and lore interpretations. I am giving this one some sincere props because I think it is uh legit. Okay, the channel is literally at Fazbear Entertainment Corp. Um they have been it's such a new channel too that just YouTube recommended to me. It was literally video uploaded 4 weeks ago. There is a second video that is addressing issues with it or perceived issues with it. Um which I only watched the beginning of, admittedly. I fell back asleep because I'm eepy. Um, can you really trust the Fazbear Entertain? Yeah, that's the funny thing. So even though I say this, I said the name. I need to preface: this is a fan channel. This is not affiliated with the actual company. It is at Fazbear Entertainment Corp. Uh, but I guess they just snagged it because it was available. So I mean, props on that. The eepiest of the seven streams, if you will. Um, but explaining that timeline I thought was very interesting because it gave more of a rearranging these two events changed a lot from my perception, especially given the, is trying to replicate what happened sense. It makes it feel like instead of initially targeting, you know, the man who runs his business parallel to him, oh, that was terrible. Sorry. Uh, his co-CEO, his best friend, who also has a young child, instead of going immediately for that, he splits off from the company. He kills some kids. He makes his fucking circus baby spin-off, and then it closes and then is acquired by the company that is now fully run by the friend that he abandoned, and he resents that so much because he's such a narcissistic murderer that he then kills his former best friend's daughter out of spite. And then Charlie possessing the puppet, and as depicted in Five Nights at Freddy's 2's cutscenes, is helping the animatronics, helping the child spirits to possess the animatronics and become more animate within them. And I think this is a process that is happening again and again because, of course, in those cutscenes, you are at the Five Nights at Freddy's 1 location. But considering the fact that they were haunting the first, like, the withered animatronics, as the fans call them, and then it is at least lightly implied the toy animatronics are at least influenced using the parts, when these ones are made, which I think are just, amalgamations of the suits from Five Nights at Freddy's 2, they're having to repossess these vessels, these constructs. I know you just started, but Henry refers to the insane incident as a wound first inflicted upon me. You see, that's the thing. In the Fazbear Entertainment video, that is directly addressed. That is directly... You know what? How about I link the video? I'm not going to play it, because I don't want to, have this be like a react stream. But I don't think Henry is lying. I think he is just... He doesn't know as much as, like, Michael, or specifically the player. Like, he doesn't have the full scope of everything, but he knows enough to be like he needs to be stopped. Um, I mean, hey, maybe you have, but continuing. So Charlie is killed. The five more deaths, as depicted in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, happen on the what was it? Well, okay, so it's Bite of 87, the five deaths, and then uh uh as depicted in you know the retcon, as it is called, um William Afton is not tried, or rather he is tried, but he is not imprisoned because they have no evidence because he hid the bodies. um Meanwhile, Henry, being the active CEO, I think is imprisoned for like what do you call it? Oh wait, I have my notes. Right. Yeah, I didn't even get to talk about these. Henry is imprisoned for corporate negligence. That's what it was. Yes, I'll get to those notes too, by the way. Um uh and because now uh uh because Henry's imprisoned, William becomes CEO by default. And he uses that newfound power to become to make Fazbear Entertainment horrifically deadly and hostile. He puts everything back into the Five Nights at Freddy's 1 location, and he is the explicit reason why they have like the door system and the power running out every night, and the fact that like they keep hiring new security guards. Um, he designed that place explicitly to kill people and get their souls into more animatronics. I don't know how successful he was, but you know. And ultimately, you know, Michael ends up taking that job. Probably just needed some money. Did not intend to see the ghost of his little brother. It's his fun little game. He's having fun. Um, and meanwhile, Afton is just experimenting with his scarecrow fear toxin. I unfortunately can't undo that being real in the canon, so I'll just acknowledge it there. Um, Now here's the part that's gonna, you know, this is less evidence based and more um something I've noticed that I don't think a lot of FNAF fans have, because there's something I did not acknowledge up here involving Vanessa. So, if you've seen the movies, you will know, spoilers, by the way, for the Five Nights at Freddy's live action movie. Vanessa is the daughter of William Afton in that movie. Now, obviously, um, that movie isn't canon, and that movie differs greatly in the fact that Mike Schmidt, who is the protagonist of Five Nights at Freddy's 1 and is supposed to be uh, Michael's daughter, not sorry, goodness, bleh. uh, fucking William's son, had everything backwards there. um, uh, and also there are characters that are just not present in the normal timeline. However, in Security Breach, you can find some documents talking about Vanessa, and you'll never believe what the first letter of her last name is. A. And considering FNAF has its very, very ongoing trend of revealing information that is canonical and also extremely relevant to the games in, you know, continuing installations, regardless of how canon people think the thing is. I think this was meant as a very genuine way to get the idea that Vanessa is secretly an Afton into the heads and minds of the public. I don't think her dad's name is actually revealed in the game, but oh no, no, wait, it is. Wait, no, it's Bill, which is fucking a foreshortening of William. And you see, this introduces a problem with people thinking that these games take place in the 2030s because the fucking William Afton would have been dead, or, you know, undead, for about 40 years. And Vanessa, unlike every other human character up to that point who is a security guard or, you know, relevant adult, she has an explicit age. She is 23 years old. If this game takes place in 2035, she would have been born in 2012. Which leaves horrible, horrible implications. Either that or she's a clone of, like, his wife or something. Which I don't want to get into that or believe that. Which is why I have this. To continue off of FNAF's other funny Joker's trick of making prior information mean other things, a completely different context for prior information, if you will. I think that Vanessa was born in 2003. It's a little pocket of time that I determined somehow. Sorry, my brain just died there. I forget explicitly how I came up with the year 2003, if I'm being real with you. But that is because I have streamer brain, and I'm trying to tell you a lot of information at once. And it's hard to keep that info in your head while being, you know, keeping up the personality and being entertaining and responding to chat, which I'm not even doing right now. So let me look at the chat really quick. You don't know, maybe... No. That's the implication I'm trying to avoid. No, she is explicitly 23. Like, according to the wiki, which, if I remember correctly, actually had a source for that one, unlike the dates for everything else. Her name is stated in the game from at least what the wiki had said. But yeah. So 2003. Afton dismantles the animatronics and makes Funtime Freddy / Lefty, which, if you don't know, Funtime Freddy is an amalgamation of the 4 main animatronics and Golden Freddy. And Lefty is just literally just a fucking exoskeleton that contains the puppet. But yeah. So retroactively, I think that this vampire show is a metaphor for their divorce in 2003, and the baby is Vanessa. Because before, it seemed like the implication was the baby was Michael, which makes sense, obviously, in context of the game, narratively. Um, I am just using this as a bit of a way to justify this retcon. Uh, because where else? Where else could I introduce this at? Because it's a very niche pocket of time where this info could happen. Oh wait, right. Sorry, I just remembered why it was 2003. Um, it was because of all of the like all of this working around this. The theory that Five Nights at Freddy's 1 takes place in 1989. I got that from a video by the YouTuber The Unwithered Truth. Uh really really good YouTuber, really great production value, especially since they started doing YouTube videos this year. Genuinely genuinely spectacular. Like they have animations, they have fucking really well done pacing, recording, editing, like fuck. Very solid you know, video essay. Video essayist. I don't think chat's updating for me anymore. I keep seeing messages out of the corner of my eye, but then there we go. I mean, how old she'd be in 2025. Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. But yes. Um, it was working all of this in relation to it because, uh, you know, if it's supposed to be, sorry, if FNAF 3 is supposed to take place 30 years after Five Nights at Freddy's 1, then that means, FNAF 3 would have to take place in 2019 because 1989. And because of that, there needs to be a pocket of time where Vanessa could be born without Springtrap existing. So that is what I determined it to be, just based off of you know, the general surrounding games. Solid theory? Thank you. Um, I know it is very speculative, uh, and is not. It's only supported by other theories, being correct, as in, you know, going off the assumption that this is correct. I think the Unwithered Truth really won me over, and uh, the theories that Fazbear Entertainment, uh, the YouTube channel, had were really solid as well. So I, you know, those definitely using both of those merged into this timeline. As using them as the basis, I mean. So, you know, William is simultaneously doing all of this murderer shit, and dealing with making the fun time, Freddy and Lefty. But he's also handling his divorce, which does not go well, and it results in little baby Vanessa, their most recent daughter, going into custody of her mother. And and then he dies. May divorce be with you. Now, this is a personal theory, because there is one character that is never mentioned in the entire franchise, but she exists, presumably. Miss Afton. We don't even have a name. There is a recurring theory that, William won the divorce and then murdered her and put her in the Ballora animatronic, but I actually don't think that's correct. Mostly because, much like my theory that I'm about to present to you, that doesn't have any basis. That's just a fun fan interpretation that got picked up. Think that's a very mean theory. Yes. I think Miss Afton becomes CEO of Fazbear Entertainment. And with that, after Five Nights at Freddy's 3, and FNAF World, where all the secret stuff happens, to contextualize FNAF World, something that I did not mention with the handling of it by the theory community is that apparently FNAF World's description talks about it being an in-universe RPG game that had secret shit hidden in it, which is the, you know, the metatextual stuff. It is the combination of it being literally a game from in-universe while also being representative of the events of, Five Nights at Freddy's 3 secret stuff happening in the afterlife. Because these games, I theorize, well, this game, I theorize, was made by the same person who made the, in-universe Five Nights at Freddy's games. Which, then leaves off on the implication that FNAF World leaves off on one of its secret things where it builds up sister location and explicitly shows baby. And since in the lore, it's never really explained by like the theory sort of stuff, but somehow Springtrap, or rather, before he becomes Springtrap, I guess William tells Mike where his sister is, and then he leaves, and then he gets Springtrapped. That's at least what the theory crafting channels I've seen have talked about. I would like to believe that, sorry, my brain. I think that Mike played FNAF World, found the secret stuff in it, and interpreted that ending, where you learn about baby, as a message from William to him, when it was actually, an inside leaker being like, hey, they got secret shit. They did all these fucked up things. I think she's represented by Ballora, but not properly literally her. It does make sense. It does make sense narratively as a parallel, but there are people who think that it is literally her, which I do not subscribe to. Maybe the Mimic told Michael about us. I'm trying to de-emphasize the Mimic a little bit, but that's just me. That's just me personally. I think it would be cool if, this game had a little more weight to it narratively, importance in the narrative overall. So I marked that as Fazbear Entertainment starts trying to cover up the murders, but also kills the game dev of their cover-up games who hides a secret message for Michael. If you're wondering about the Mrs. Afton becomes CEO, I have it down here in my notes. So I do believe Mrs. Afton was either complacent with the murders, either learning about it later or knowing about them the entire time, or was an accomplice to William's crimes, which either way would incentivize her to cover up everything while she is creating such a hostile and lethal working environment in the future pizzerias and the mini mall. Because of all characters that we at least have knowledge of existing, she would be the only one that benefits in any way from there still being murderous, you know, leftover protocols and the mimic and fucking all the like serve bots that like kill you in the VR games. She would be the only one that would really benefit from that. Otherwise, it's just a murderous board of CEOs, which I mean, that works too. I just think it'd be funny to have, well, not funny, but like it would make narrative sense to have a figurehead leading said CEO board. Uh, which is why I think it's her. Maybe after the divorce, so William got his shit kicked in, Miss Afton had a way out. Yeah, yeah, pretty much. She took the company and the baby in the divorce. Hold on a second, I got a text message. Okay. So one thing I skirted around was Into the Pit. The reason why people don't like this is because it's based off the books. They also don't like it because there's time travel in this game, supposedly. And there is also a lot of conflicting bits of lore in the eyes of theory crafters because it references the books, but also being an adaptation of the book would contrast some of that, sort of. I mean, it would probably just be an adaptation, really. But then there's also little clues and hints poking towards, like, the movies, which I think are just supposed to be Easter eggs. Personally, I think that's just supposed to be like, haha, we're referencing the movie. Isn't that funny? Lol. But what I have seen people who have fully played the game and fully want to accept it as a piece of canon have interpreted this as, and even though it's a very weird, we are dealing with more ghost goo explanation type of thing here, you don't actually time travel. You go into this little ball pit that is so heavily possessed by spirits that is causing you to hallucinate you being in 1985 when the murders happened. Because you are in a restaurant called Jeff's Pizza, which is canonically in the game the former place where the five main children were murdered. There's other Easter eggs to other books as well. That as well. Yeah, that's the weird thing, is that I have heard nothing but praise as well about Into the Pit, like graphically, narratively, tonally. Like it kind of seems like everything people wanted FNAF to be. But like, the greater theorizing community detests it for being this little monkey wrench in the overall, like, oh, but my theory crafting, it doesn't adhere to my preconceived notions that I'm sort of aping off of MatPat for. Which, you know, that was a point made very apparent to me in the Fazbear Entertainment theory video. Is that really there isn't anything in this game, apparently, or the most of the books. There are a couple, but I mean, you know, that stuff is usually labeled as literally non-canon. But there isn't that much that is really going, hey, this wouldn't or can't be part of this whole timeline. It seemed like it's supposed to be in here. So sorry, it seems like most of the books are canon. Ugh. Also, it's quite clear that the ball pit stuff is an effect of the agony present, which is quite strange because of another canon book, which ball pit allows you to time travel. Oh, So they were acknowledging something from the books to make it so that way this game wouldn't be canon. Isn't it funny how they pick and choose when this information is relevant enough to, you know, uh supposedly contradict, like I was saying earlier? Hmm? Hmm? Supplementary for lore details, there's practically zero narrative addition. It's mostly about stuff in the world. Exactly. Exactly. It's, I've just seen some real, as the kids call it, copium with that sort of stuff. Uh, I think it kind of gave me this impression, at least from the many different sources that I watched before this. But regardless, in 2020, uh, I think that's when Sister Location happens. He finds out about the stuff in FNAF World at the end of 2019, and then at the beginning of 2020, goes gets a job at Afton Robotics Co. Tries to find Baby. Uh, and Meanwhile, Henry Emily is released from jail and given the means for his plan by Miss Afton. Because in real life, if a CEO is sent to jail, you don't just get to walk out and be like, I have the company again. I have the rights to it. No, no. This would be an explicit contractual, like, handing of ownership over and everything. And I don't even think there's implication in the game that Henry Emily is running Fazbear Entertainment. I think he is just given the means to do so by the people running Fazbear Entertainment, which I am interpreting as Miss Afton. Also, since you've not read the book, I do have to point out the potential world-ending sea monkey scenario. Oh, okay. I'll look into that. Maybe I'll do a follow-up stream about that. Ooh, boy. Okay. I mean, that's fun. That's quirky. It was difficult to get the rights together. I'm sorry. But continue. Um, so because of that, um, uh, the events of Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria Simulator happens. I do believe that Michael is supposed to be the one in there. Um, I don't know if Michael dies, though. Um, I do think the idea of him hearing Henry Emily's like speech, and then he's like, he hears I think you're actually where you want to be. And he's like, no, the fuck I'm not. And then he just runs out of the building, out of the fire exit. I do think that is very funny. But there has been in, the security breach games, at least a lingering implication that he is not dead. I think also the fact that he is not in Ultimate Custom Night, which obviously you would have to depict him. You would have to actually show his face in that, which the fact that he doesn't show up there, I think, is at least a little emblematic of that. Though also it'd be very funny to have just man jump scare. Though obviously, I think he would show up as a rotted fucking corpse, which that would be scary. Um, I would enjoy that a lot. Yeah, I think so too. So, okay. These games I'm placing at 2023 and 2026. This is right after fucking Freddy Fazbear sinks into the earth and uh you know all that. Sorry, I didn't know how to say words there for a second. Um Man jump scare, wouldn't that be weird? Yeah, a little bit. Maybe it's because they don't have the right to Rick Astley's likeness. That is true. Because if you don't know, Michael Afton's silhouette in the game is well, it's just a traced image from Never Gonna Give You Up, by Rick Astley. And that's real. That's actually real. But yeah, I put these at 2023 and 2026 because I would like to believe after this plan, that is when the development of these games would start. And since they took about 3 years each to develop in real life, the VR title specifically, I figured they should probably go side by side. Security breach happens next year. Yeah, let's go. Let's go to the Pizzaplex. But yeah, I do believe there is some stuff at Help 1 2 that would place it between these two games explicitly. But you know, I was mostly just trying to indicate the year that these happened. I put less thought into this area than I was the whole rest of it. Most of my focus was trying to figure out this. So, yeah. And that would allow, 20-year-old, Vanessa Afton to, apply for the VR position, work on the game as a tester, get possessed, and spend a couple years flipping between. Kind of like how the Joker slowly took over Tim Drake's mind in Batman Beyond, Return of the Joker. And then the events of security breach happen. And then probably Help 1 2, and then Ruin, and then whatever else will be in the future. So before we go, let me talk about these last couple of thoughts I have. Maybe Help 1 and 2 happens around security breach, some things before, some during, some after. Yeah, I think that's a more general good interpretation of it. Thank you. So here's some little bits and pieces I came up with that I didn't want to put like on a specific like timeline grid. So Fredbear, the location from FNAF 4, becomes Junior's bar, which is seen in FNAF 6. They send the spring locks after they malfunction to Freddy Fazbear's pizzeria, the FNAF 2 location. So that way, they can be used on the 6th night for William's second murder spree. Freddy's, the FNAF 1 location, is where the first 5 are killed. After which those animatronics are sent to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, the FNAF 2 location. But they shut down to salvage parts for the toy designs, which I think are called toy designs because they are based on the cartoon series that exists in universe as seen in FNAF 4. Which is then, after the fight, they're all sent back to Freddy's, the FNAF 1 location, while Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is turned into Jeff's Pizza from Into the Pit, which is then reacquired and is Pizza Simulator's Freddy Fazbear establishment. Thank you. Yeah, I was holding off on Midnight Motorist this whole time. I kind of glazed over it when talking about Charlie getting killed, but very, very vital piece of lore for that one. But yeah, we've talked about this. When William was acquitted, Henry was sent to prison for corporate negligence as the CEO, and believed by the public at large to have been the killer. Uh, and that is so that way those papers in Five Nights at Freddy's 1, where they say the killer was charged with the fucking, you know, crime, is not contradicted, but also not retconned. Uh, which then gives William total freedom to make the reopened Freddy's, which is then renamed Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, uh, to ape off of the more popular second location, intentionally lethal, like the doors and the running out of power and the fact that they have a big fucking hallway to sprint down and come and kill you. uh, then we fully win over Mrs. Afton, or Miss Afton, who I think should be upgraded to the villain of the series going forward. I sincerely believe, regardless of what ending of Ruin is canon, and however the Mimic video game shakes out, I think it would be a good pivot. I think it would be a very fun pivot to make your enemy basically just a shady board of CEOs led by someone who has been secretly here the whole time. I think that is fun. For the most part, I don't really theorize FNAF because it's like joining a race 5 hours after everybody already started. My particular insanity is Sonic when it comes to theories. The one I'm most familiar about are game theory ones by Rytoast. I remember the Miss Afton theory being a big thing for game theory, and a lot of people hated it, and then the Mimic happened, and that idea got dropped. Well, okay, so unpacking all of that, it's okay that you don't theorize FNAF. I'm just doing this a little bit of fun. A little bit of fun since I fell down this little rabbit hole. Um, uh, I did not base my Miss Afton thing off of anything game theory. I have not watched game theory in well over a decade at this point. Um, I kind of stopped, or I think I actually did kind of stop around the time he started covering FNAF. Cause man, that fucking first one he did really did put a sour taste in my mouth. Even as a like a very emotionally stunted teenager. Uh, uh, and it's a shame to hear that Miss Afton was hated at large apparently. Because I think it works very well in the context here, though obviously I'm not giving Matt Pat props. This is my idea. This is my little fun little headcanon. Apparently you need a law degree to understand it now. Uh well, I never went to college, so um like in the broad terms, I don't think it's that hard to understand. Like, I think people have just overcomplicated things. And I unfortunately think that some of the info is just doled out in the wrong places. Which leads me to a little thing down here, which is sadly my last point, but I'll skip ahead. Uh, I think they should remake the core games as 1 month at Freddy's. And by core games, I mean like the old like Click Team ones. Um, and I think they should go in the chronological order just to settle any qualms people have and just give people a definitive, hey, this was the intent. If you can get through everything, good on you. Maybe make some brand new cutscenes to like lace through like Five Nights at Freddy's 1 and 3, just so that way you can inject some of the info and lore that probably should have been more in relation to those two games that we got after. Though controversially, I think maybe they should leave out Five Nights at Freddy's 4, since its framing device technically is meant to be the William Afton Scarecrow fear toxin bunker. Um, if anything, I think that should be a challenge mode, especially since some people think this is the hardest game in the franchise because of the listening and the hearing. I would just call it the most overstimulating because I have sound sensitivity, but that's just me. Uh, Personally, I like how little the mimic features in your timeline, but that's because I've always hated this particular view of the mimic. I feel that people latched onto it so strongly because they were so against the idea of Afton coming back again. I I mean, I have to agree on some level just because like I think this was a very narratively satisfying conclusion with Ultimate Custom Night, but on the other hand, I just think they have built up a lot of stuff around the mimic, but nothing really on the mimic itself because it's just William Afton again, of course, which, it child murderer, bad, obviously. But like I I feel like there's better directions to go than, oh, this thing has copied all of his motions and his emotions and wants to kill you. I think just creating a new villain would be fun, like Miss Afton. However, I will say this clown, which has been, the fucking headliner, the star of the whole mimic game, even though I'm pretty sure this is not supposed to be the mimic, but some secret third thing. I think that could be a fun ongoing villain if they wanted it to be. Who knows? Maybe Secret the Mimic will be really good, and it'll make the Mimic like a new favorite character for people. Who knows? Uh, all I know is that the Mimic is basically incidental to the events of like security breach at large, which is funny for how much it was built up and help wanted. Uh and then of course like it's entirely the focus of Ruin. But you don't even find that up till the end. Like you literally don't find it up till the end of both. Actually, technically, all of these games, they're all build up, and then when the mimic comes in as like, oh look at me, I'm the mimic. It's only there for like 5 to 10 minutes at a time. It's a little bit of a deflation, if anything, and doing that 4 times in a row, I think is maybe uh, a reason people had such negative opinions on the mimic in general. But I definitely agree that people were probably just really mad about William Afton coming back. Uh FNAF 4 was meant to be a dream, but then it turned to dream theory. Yeah. Oh god. I didn't want to touch the dream theory thing because that is why I marked this as disputed. As disputed. Sorry, my little PNG tuber was covering it. Um, I marked that as disputed because, you know, there's a lot of people who still think Dream Theory applies even with like the rest of the franchise going on. Uh, and obviously, like the fifth, like the wait, was it fifth or sixth night? The one after the bite was very clearly a metaphor. It was very clearly a metaphor for, you know, the kid getting bitten. And then the one non-canon night with the night marionette or whatever it was called. That one was very clearly a metaphor for the puppet helping Evan possess his animatronic. You know, well, I didn't say anything bad about the night marionette. I was just explaining. I think it's one of the best designs in the game. I think it has the best fucking uh like crash your game jump scare out of all of them. Uh, well, it's hard to parse that through text. I'm sorry, especially when you do all caps and make it seem like, oh, you know. I forget that that's like a there's like a term for that where stuff doesn't like read well through text as well. But I digress. Um. Uh. See, I thought after Help Wanted we were going to move into the next arc of FNAF rather than still dealing with. Yes, I agree with that as well. I would have preferred Vanny to have been the overarching villain. I only propose Miss Afton as the pivot because since literally all the build up to Vanny was undone, unless we're going to undo it and make her the villain again, um I think it would be better if she were the protagonist who is fighting back against this corrupt company and the people running it, uh because they allowed her to be fucking brainwashed and mind controlled. uh and I think that conflict would especially be heightened since, it would be her mother, you know. The same way it's literally just gender swapped Michael Afton and William Afton pretty much. My big meta theory is that there's multiple different paths written out for the story. Uh, I wouldn't like there's alternate endings. I wouldn't say they go anywhere though. Like there is very clearly like a canon ending for all of these games. Like even this pizzeria simulator game had uh alternate endings, but there was still very clearly the canon ending. If they wanted to do like a near automata like timeline split, I think that's fun, and I think that's a concept more franchises need to do, honestly. Because divergent timelines, I know they're a bit of a trend right now with the whole alternate universe sort of thing. But there's always been alternate universe media. Like, literally, some of the most popular things in fucking history are, to an extent, either reinterpreted fan stuff that they couldn't get the rights to make an actual adaptation of, or literal alternate universes of established media. Uh, Also, people have switched Evan to Dave, which I think makes sense. Which with the franchise history of reusing name, is Evan used multiple times? Oh no, wait, Dave's used multiple times. I see. I forgot about Dave as a name. I do think Dave Afton sounds a little more phonetically better than Evan Afton, but oh, uh, no, it's okay, Anya. I'm sorry. Uh, Vanny can exist separate from Vanessa. After, but I don't know where they're going with that. Well, if that if that theory of her having a secret twin sister and there have been secretly been five instead of four Afton kids this whole time is real, they could do that. But I don't know. The Princess Quest ending is the right one, isn't brainwashed anymore. Yep. Yeah. We all know that the ending in Security Breach where Gregory escapes with Freddy in a van isn't true. That is also correct. Uh I didn't mean like endings, but like story as a whole, actually multiple story. Yeah, okay. No, that is completely fair. My apologies for misinterpreting. Uh I my wantingness for near automata time splits still stands. I want that. I want that for more media because I think it is very scrutinized when it can lead to very fun things and very fun alternate paths. One thing that I would love is like okay, there's this game series, unrelated, called Deus Ex, which was made by Mark Spector, creator of System Shock and Epic Mickey. Uh, and it has multiple endings as well. Um, However, when they did a sequel, they did an interpretation of the sequel where all of the alternate endings were canon, and it makes a really weird, really odd, have your cake and eat it too type of atmosphere for that universe and that new timeline. When I think they maybe should have gone the route of, hey, let's explore each individual option and its narrative implications. Uh, that's just me. And yeah, Shadow the Hedgehog. Yeah, that's actually a great example. Um, but yes, so two last things to talk about. I think the candy games should be canon. So if you don't know, there's a fan character named Candy the Cat, who had their own trilogy of FNAF games, which are apparently really good fan games. And then Scott Cawthon purchased the rights to it and a couple other fan games to make an ongoing fan game universe initiative, which I think is really fucking cool, to be honest. I think more creators should do stuff like that, and like just to parallel my own creative works, I have made stuff like World Walkers, the book project that I've been working on, in such a way that I want other people to be able to build off of it and make their own stories and their own interpretations and stuff, because I really like that idea. And I feel in either direction, whether you're purchasing the fan works outright or you're encouraging fan works to exist alongside the canon, um, I I think more creators should, you know, make that be a viable option for their fans. Uh, because it could lead to a lot of interesting different takes, new stories, and generating new ideas. Um, but from what I have seen, um, the oh, the rights still belong to the creator Scott. Just well, that's nice. Well, that's nice too. Um, I read that the Candy games were going, well, not going. They were considered, or at the very least, they were available to the devs of the AR phone game. Which, by the way, sorry, I don't want that one to be canon because I think just the death toll implications of that little too big to come back from. I'm sorry, but um um the Pop Goes characters were on the table to show up in that, but they just ultimately didn't. Uh I know there's unfortunately controversy stuff around the Flumpty creator, which I don't want to talk about, especially with the subject matter, you know, and me being a victim of related, not directly like them, but like, you know, subject matter wise, victim of related, uh, you know, trauma. Uh, and that with another one of the FNAF fan games, I think that was the remake, like the attempted remake. Um, but the only still ongoing one is the Candy the Cat Pop Goes games. uh, which supposedly is they're trying to get it released, like, or at least like they're wrapping up production. I mean, which good for them. Good for them. Uh, One thing I've liked analyzing a little about FNAF that I haven't seen talked about is the parallels between Michael in the games and Charlie in the books, and the sort of sins of the father both stories have. Cool. Uh, yeah, I suppose that's the folly of a lot of the FNAF creators that don't uh look at the books from like just a narrative standpoint, I suppose. I wouldn't know. FNAF Plus, I think, was canceled by the creator because he kind of hated the fan hated them. Okay, fair. Fair enough. Uh, Kind of in dev hell, and it seems like the Candy dev is mainly working on Pop Goes at the... What? Uh, so they're working on it, but also it's in dev hell. Uh, well, I guess that makes sense, but like, well, shoot. Aw, shucks. Just from my general knowledge, it doesn't sound like anything in the Pop Goes games is exactly contradictory. It just very additive. Uh but from my understanding, the remakes were supposed to take away some of the stuff like, there's just a reskin of the puppet. Like not even reskin, recolor, um which would that would contradict the Five Nights at Freddy's lore if that was just kept as is. It's just taking a really long time and some lot of scope creep and extra stuff. No, that's actually super understandable. I'm glad he's at least letting it, letting them cook, because I think they've been working on it for like almost a decade at this point. Uh, to my limited knowledge, of course. Popco's only uses the first three games, but Candies might fit. Oh, so they're different things. Oh, I see. Sorry, I conflated the two in my head. I thought Pop Goes was the series that Candy the Cat came from. My apologies. My appall my up bleh, my apologies, cuz it's a cat. Anyways, still Joy of Creation, which released a demo that people love. Well, hey, there you go. Um but two I think, oh right, I already talked about that. No. The thing that I wanted to talk about this whole time that I have not mentioned at all, this universe is like 1,000% a cyberpunk dystopia. Like, just the general implication of the technology, the level of technology that is being used on a casual corporate level being developed, um and the earliest points of which that technology is being developed. Like, the whole thing with the Mimic is that it's like a scary fucking AI program that can copy the emotions and like actions of any human being. And that's developed in 1979, when like even the Freddy Fazbear stuff was still, you know, advanced to the point of like 2000s animatronic standards, but still nothing like near that level. But then you get further along, and even like 1985, you get the fucking like Circus Baby stuff, and that shit hyper complex. Like, even the later animatronics in the series kind of don't match up to that, aside from the Mimic, which is from earlier. Uh, and then, you look at the most recent games, very specifically these ones, and the level of like tech weirdness and digitizing consciousnesses, holograms, solograms, even if like, Ruin is to, be believed. and you aren't just walking on air. Um, fucking uh AI digital intelligences and personalities, sapience, uh, extremely articulated and, you know, full motion animatronics that can walk around and respond to people in real time, uh, brainwashing people. And then there was also just from the trailer of like the Mimic like game where it revealed like a little bit of the setting, even the computers uh like the retro style computers are wildly divergent, and there's a bunch of weird ass like puzzle tech stuff, which obviously, you know, that's for video game purposes, but still, the point being that the aesthetics and the level of development clearly different than real life, and that would surely only increase as time went on. So I think that is an aspect worth exploring. Um, but that's just me. Uh, that joke was a catastrophe. Ah, I see what you're doing. Uh, I had to step out for a while back there. Did you cover Fall Fest yet? I'll be real here. I know about the Fall Fest event that happened in the year 1970 specifically. I don't really get its importance. Like, I guess it's the debut of like the thing that becomes the FNAF animatronics is kind of where the fucking like in-universe franchising starts. But you know, we don't have a game to really represent that with. I mean, it is displayed in like I think this one, but I didn't have like a real clear understanding or understanding of like where it would be as narratively important as like the core games. Which is, you know, nothing against, you know, that little bit of the lore or anything, or you saying that, of course. I just mean that as, you know, just explaining why I failed to mention it because I am not super acquainted with it. Uh, Lesme. You'd think every depiction of the modern world seems relatively normal, with the spooky FNAF stuff still being seen as weird. I, you see, that's an interesting thing because when you think about it in the context of like the company themselves, you know, rebranding and like, you know, trying to sell its fucked up evil history as a product, as many products, that might not be as weird of a thought as it is here, you know? Um, in our world. Uh, I love thinking about these kind of like weird ass timeline situations. It's fun. It's the kind of stuff that made me do like that big cork board that I did back in like 2020 of like how every franchise in the fucking ever made connects back to Scooby Doo. Hi, Aardvark, welcome. Uh, and yeah, there's all the like uh other designs of like the FNAF animatronics would show up in like, you know, FNAF World and some of the DLCs, and then of course Ultimate Custom Night, which is very funny because you gotta wonder what was made for like the in-universe games. Like there's Hollow Chica right there, which was, you know, part of the Halloween update for FNAF 4. So in universe, you know, was that is that fake? Like, did that ever exist conceptually? Or is it a real like uh fucking FNAF world, other uh Land of the Dead type entity. Uh in which case, how the fuck do they know about that? You know? uh of course, probably just took descriptions of like the hallucinations from FNAF 4, like his weird fucking scarecrow bunker, but there's a couple that can't be explained in the same breath on that roster. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but yeah. Oh wait, yeah, Night Marionette is. Oh well, I guess that could be a hallucination, I guess. But it'd be cool if that was actually like the specter of death or whatever of death. Um, Talking about Fall Fest is like talking about Mario has a niece. I didn't know that. That's cool. Uh, Dreadbear event. I'm unfamiliar with the Dreadbear event. I've seen the design of Dreadbear, which was fun. I do like that design a lot. I didn't know that was anything more than just an alternate costume, to be honest. Uh, Perhaps a follow up is needed to talk about other obscure bits, but honestly, I I kind of want to get FNAF World. To my understanding, it's delisted on Steam, but I think I could probably get a copy. A legitimate legal copy. It's on GameJolt. Oh, okay, cool. Then I can get an actual legitimate legal copy, which was always my intent to do. Yes. Uh, I will say, as just a final sort of thought, if any Freddy Fazbear fandom game makers out there who have like the actual knowledge of programming and coding, I have one genuine request because I have no fucking clue how to make this myself. Um, can you please make a version of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator where it goes on forever? And what I mean by that is, I love tycoon games, and I think the tycoon make your own Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria uh aspect of that game is super duper charming. And the idea that all of that could be taken away from you if you're killed by one of the animatronics, I think is a really good sort of balance of like the horror and also, yay, we're having fun. Now we're having fun. um my only request, because I want this game to be like a achievable, go for as long as you can type tycoon game, please give me an option to fucking bash in the heads of the animatronics like at least once per night. Because I think it would be really fucking funny. It would be really funny if it's like you're doing really successfully. You're doing so successfully at your pizzeria. You're on like night 17 and you don't want to end this run. So you have a baseball bat, and if an animatronic tries to sneak up on you while you're doing your work, you can bash its head in, and it permanently damages the animatronic, and you either need to fix the parts or you need to outright buy a replacement. And the only way to keep these things at bay, other than just, obeying the rules of FNAF, if you just don't want to deal with their shit all the time, just give me a baseball bat, and then I'll replace the parts or put the souls to rest through some esoteric minigame, or some way that I can still have a fun little tycoon game with this nice theming. Uh, I would be so smiles, and I would stream that gladfully. I think if you had a shotgun, you could easily survive on all the FNAF games. Yeah, yeah, you really could. And you see, that would make it a fun tycoon sort of situation. It's like, shit, I would need to get an animatronic replacement for this, and I could lose out on getting some revenue, but I won't die, which will always be a good investment opportunity, you know? When all the things in your place want to kill you. And from that, the more animatronics you buy, the more it starts to become a bit of an ultimate custom night situation. But since you're, explicitly buying the animatronics and you have a means to like fight back against them a little bit, I think it would create a really good balance here where the game it can get really hard like Ultimate Custom Night if you want it to, but if you just want to have a fun sort of breezy time, you can put a 7 caliber up to baby's head, you know? I think it'd be really fun. I think it'd be a really fun sort of gameplay style. Uh Little risk reward, but also um building off of, a very unique situation in this franchise that has not been covered since. Because there's been tons of fan games covering, the other Click Team titles, but man, I love a tycoon game. I love tycoon games, and I especially love when I can do them forever, or at the very least, really, really, really long. Uh, and I think a lot of tycoon games also don't have that sort of risk management system where it's like, oh, you could lose your assets, but usually when that happens, it is a guarantee you're about to risk sorry, it is a guarantee you're about to lose these assets, and the game is going, okay, start a new save, get out. And it always feels unearned, or you feel bad because it's like, fuck, what could I have done different? Shit. But this feels like an active sort of balancing act of like, okay, I'm having fun making my little tycoon little pizzeria that I'm turning into this giant entity with like multiple differing locations, and the building is now a giant skyscraper full of evil animatronics and stuff like that. Silly fun stuff like that. And then, oh god, I could lose my entire empire if, Foxy comes up to my head while I'm filing my taxes and bites the shit out of me. Oh, no. I think that would be really fun. The true survival game, capitalism. I hate to say it. I hate to say it. It's capitalism is very fun game mechanic. I think capitalism should exclusively be a game mechanic and not a thing in real life, to be honest. Uh that one I don't hate to say. Uh Here's the thing. Roblox tycoon games, and yes, I have played Roblox. Um they don't scratch the same itch. That one, it is very uh time consuming. Like very much the payoff is if you're waiting a certain amount of time, then the game lets you progress forward. Uh and those always feel the worst to play because, your time is valuable. You should be having fun and actively doing something in a game instead of just waiting, you know. Uh which unfortunately I think literally every tycoon game in Roblox I've ever played, it just wastes your time, or it tries to take your money, or incentivizes you to buy, you know, items or subscribe to like their Twitter or some other manipulative stuff that is very targeted at the child demographic that, bad. I don't like stuff that preys on kids. Really don't. Uh, but yeah. The instant they discovered metal, they were like, okay, no child labor. Oh, if only we lived in that universe. The Industrial Revolution is not canon to FNAF. Oh man, that's fucking funny. Luckily, my parents never gave me access to their money. I I didn't play Roblox until fucking I was 21. I literally played it for the first time like um New Year's Eve going into 2022. And that's cuz my friends were playing it. And you know, they got fun games on there. They got fun games on there. Uh it just there's a lot to sift through and a lot that is just way too exploitative of the child brain, which is a whole different plate of a whole different plate of cookies for a different glass of milk. Uh, but again, sincerely, please, if any, if any fan game developer, uh, like wants to take this idea, please, please, I urge you to. I would help. I would supply my voice. I would even do art, even though that's difficult for me as a disabled lady. By the way, in case you're wondering, this week was a little hectic, so I didn't make a whole lot of progress on Null, I'm sorry to say. But I am getting close. I am getting close to releasing the first page finally, and I'm very excited about that, and I hope you are too. So yay. Uh, but yeah. Uh, Closing thoughts. Um, I think this franchise is very all over the place. I definitely like Sister Location and the Pizzeria Simulator and 1 and 2. So, 4 out of 6 ain't bad for the originals. I can't really say anything on these because I've never played them. I mean, I haven't played any of these, but especially can't say anything on these because I've just started to interact with them, and I'm still very loose on knowledge of what occurs in them. Um, I will never play Ultimate Custom Night because that is like my personal uh torture chamber. I mean, it's literally William Afton in hell, but like, you know, I think these two, probably the only ones I would actually try and play. Because this one is so story focused that, you know, uh, it's so story focused and the gameplay is so different, permitting you don't go after the secret ending. And this one, uh, makes the whole, like, there are evil animatronics coming to kill you so much less complicated because there's only two ways they can come in and kill you. Albeit it sounds so tense, and I just really want to play a fun tycoon game. I'm okay with getting a little scared, but like, I just making a pizzeria just sounds fun. We don't have enough like tycoon games anymore. Those were big in the 2000s. Not to be, dare I say, nostalgic, because I hate nostalgia. But you know, I I I just like tycoon games. Uh, I would probably play Into the Pit too, because I mean that just seems like a very well polished game. I I think I might just download and play FNAF after the stream, the FNAF World. My curiosity is piqued. I will never play FNAF 3. I will never play FNAF 1. Um, too scary. I will never play FNAF 2, but God, thank you for making Toy Chica. Um, I will never play FNAF 4. Too scary. Too loud. Too loud and scary. I don't know. This game ain't out yet. I don't have thoughts on it. Um, I would probably never play this because, having watched Derek play it and various other YouTubers, um, the idea of being in the same physical room as these fucking, like, 7 to 8 foot robot murderous animatronics, no. No, sir. I don't want that. Unless there's like a mod that takes the jump scares or the loud noises out. I don't want that. I can't. I don't think my constitution could help hold together. Security Breach, I don't think I want to play, but it not because of like scare factor or anything. It just doesn't really interest me gameplay wise. I'm sorry to say. A free roaming FNAF game does sound fun in concept. I think they needed something different. Probably same thing here. I seen very little. The amount that I've seen, I was like, I've had enough. And probably same thing applies here for the VR. Being in the same room as these things? No. No. Security Breach is really funny. You know, I mean, I've watched, from the gameplay I've watched, it did get a few chuckles out of me. Like I was saying earlier. Okay, but Derek and Clone High to watch alongside it. Okay. If I was playing it with Derek, that would... Okay, I might do that. But, you can't hold that against me, because, that's his own schedule. I will say, I have a lot of collaborations that I want to do, particularly with Derek. I just have not done so yet. I will say, also don't tell anybody I told you this, chat. We're gonna be recording some gameplay videos, possibly even streams, if we feel like it, for all of you, about a game series that is not FNAF, but it is a game series that I have never shut the fuck up about. And if you know me well enough, you probably can glean what game we are playing. And very specifically, Derek will be reacting to these games for the first time, and I get to be the little lore keeper on his shoulder, nudging him into the right areas. I'm very excited. I'm very, very, very excited. And I hope you will be too. We don't have set dates yet, but we are planning on recording it soon. Like, soon. In conclusion, expect some stuff from me within the next week. Oh, big thing I should probably say. So I stream on Tuesdays because it's a little hard to manage the sound in the surrounding premises of my home and the sound that happens around my home from like my neighbors, like mowing the lawn or road work. And it really, my mic likes to capture that stuff a lot. I will not have as many opportunities from now till the end of summer. If you've been with my channel long enough, you probably know about my routine at this point. I have tried to break out of the routine. It just keeps happening though. Of streams being less frequent than I'd like them to be towards the late spring, end of summer. Um I'm still going to try. I'm still going to try my best cuz I like streaming and I like streaming for all of you. It's a nice little activity. A nice way to touch base with my audience for, stuff that I am doing while also having a little relaxation and also getting to talk more than like 5 sentences a day. Uh, but yeah, Garden fan fan. No, no. Well, I am very much veering Derek in the area of non-slop games. uh, but yeah. Um, I think I have said all I wanted to say. Uh, this was fun. This was very nice. I appreciate you all being here. Uh, I don't know what'll happen next. Oh, hey, I forgot to talk about this. I have an overlaid image on my stream layout. You might have heard about this. We discovered, as in scientists discovered, from using lasers to uh like tweak the way the eyes perceive light, able to see a new color. A new color not on the spectrum of like human wavelength of light. It was called OLO or OLO. Uh, and it was described as this like really vibrant, beautiful green blue hue. Uh, well, rather, that's what it looks like to us who can't see the color. Um, but let me show you this really quick. Look at this. Like, like even though it's not, we can't see what it is truly. Isn't that just a beautiful image? Isn't it crazy that like someone has seen a color that no other human being has, and we have the capacity to like replicate that now, and our brains have the ability to perceive colors that we would not see otherwise. I think that's incredible. I think that's amazing. And also, this is going to be important for my book because this exact hue relates, if you've read my book, which I know only one person has. I don't know who it is, but there's a very important character who described as a big green hue that I had to rewrite, but this color gives me literally the perfect way to keep some elements relevant. And I'm very happy about that. Also, it's almost the exact green of hue that I use for me. I mean, you can't really see it as well with all the textures that I overlaid on like my eyes and my pants, but I've been using like the same sort of emeraldish green all the time for like the last 10 years. Is my favorite color. I think that's kind of cool. Smiles. But either way, regardless, I hope you all have a wonderful evening. I hope tomorrow goes well for you all. I hope to see you back here next Tuesday. I don't know what we'll be doing. Uh wait, what day would that be? Oh, that would be the, yeah, 29. Okay. Still in April. But yeah. No, yeah, I got really lucky. I got really lucky. The fact that like the scientific discovery can back up one of the concepts that was almost removed from World Walkers, that makes me really happy. And this is not the first time that this has happened. I don't know why this keeps happening, but but yeah. I hope you all have a wonderful night. Goodbye.